Hi, I'm Adam. Welcome to another session of Right to the Top. In today's video, I want to look at the IELTS Academic Task 1 of the writing section. What we're going to look at specifically are misused vocabulary items, okay? These are words that are very common to the IELTS Task 1 section, but they're very commonly misused, or either the person doesn't know what they mean or they don't exactly understand the situations in which to use them. Specifically, I'm talking about these words: fluctuate, respectively, amount and number, and the word sales. Now, you might think, many of you will think, well, these are very easy words, right? Well, not necessarily, okay? Now, before I get into it, the main reason I'm doing this is because I know that almost every IELTS teacher will tell you to use the words fluctuate and respectively. And every IELTS book you study, if you're doing self-studying, will tell you to use these words. They're very common words for the IELTS Task 1, especially for line and bar graphs, tables, charts, etc. So it's very important that you know how to use them correctly. Now, it's better not to use these words at all than to use them incorrectly, because you're not going to impress the graders by using them correctly, but you are going to capture their attention by using them incorrectly. So let's start with the word fluctuate. First of all, what does fluctuate mean? It means to change directions often, to go up, down, so you don't have a consistent pattern. It could be side to side as well. But again, as long as there's an inconsistent movement, up and down, it's very important to remember you have to have at least 2 ups and 2 downs in order for something to fluctuate, okay? So in this graph, I have sales. Let's say I'm looking at a graph of sales, talking about money, talking about time. I have a span. So I'm going to also give you a few other words, by the way, that you can use in this task 1. You have a span, which means the entire time or the entire period of the graph. Let's say 40-year span divided into 5-year intervals. Interval is a very good word to use in this section. When you have time pieces, basically, is what interval means. So every 5 years, you have a number. So sales are going up, sales are going down, up, down, up, down, up, down. That is clear fluctuation. Fluctuate, verb, fluctuation, noun, okay? Using it in a sentence. Sales fluctuated over the span of the graph, over the whole period of the graph period. You can use with the period or without, though there was an overall increase of nearly 400%. So we started at 1, finished at 5. So overall, you had about a 400% increase. At their peak, peak is another useful word for the infographics. Peak means the highest point. So the peak is right here at 6, and whatever unit of measure you're using, $billion, trillion yen, whatever unit of measure. Don't forget to include the unit of measure. Okay. Now, here's where we get into problems. Okay. Overall, sales increased over the span of the graph period, though there were minor fluctuations from 1980 to 2000. So this is 1980, this is 2000, let's say. A lot of people say that, like, let's say you have like 3 other graphs, right? You have this graph and this graph and that graph and that graph. The blue one, people are going to say, oh, the sales of the blue graph showed fluctuations. But they didn't. Not entirely, not for the whole span. Overall, sales increased from the beginning of the time period. Let me just erase these other ones. They're a little bit messy here now. From this period to this period, you have an increase. The only time that you see fluctuations are right in the middle. So there was a period of minor fluctuations, not big changes, small changes, from 1980 to 2000, let's say. Okay? And that's what you're looking at here. Don't say there were fluctuations for this particular line of the graph, okay? Now, another thing I want you to remember, just because everybody else is using the word fluctuation and your teacher told you to use the word fluctuation, it doesn't mean that you don't have other options, okay? So overall sales increased, though there was some volatility in the 80s and 90s. Volatility basically means unsteady time, right? So it's very similar to fluctuate. If you use volatility, you'll impress the graders more than if you use fluctuate correctly, okay? Now, here's another problem situation. A lot of people will say that there were sales fluctuations here as well. But again, there is actually no fluctuation in sales. Sales are going up, 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 up. Every interval shows an increase. So there was a steady increase all the way up. But what is changing, what is fluctuating is the rate of that change, right? In the first period, it's going up kind of quick. In the next one, it slows down. Still going up, but the increase is smaller. The next one, a little bit higher. The next one, this is the fastest increase, right? So the rate of increases changes. So overall sales consistently increased over the span of the graph period, though the rate of increase fluctuated. Increased fast, increased slow, increased fast, increased slow. That's where you have to be careful. It's not the sales, it's the rate. Now, here, again, remember what I said before about fluctuations? You should have at least two changes, at least up, down, up, to make it a fluctuation. Here, you only have one. You're going up, 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 and then here, you have one drop, and then going back, back, back up. What would you call this? You can call it a minor fall, a minor decrease. Here's a good word for you, blip. Nobody uses this word. If you can use it correctly, a little bit more impressive for the graders, okay? A blip means a short anomaly in a trend, a short upward or downward movement to break the norm, the trend, the pattern, etc. Overall, sales increased steadily over the span of the graph period, though there was a minor downward blip from 1990 to 1995 during that one interval. Use blip, good word. Now, let's get to respectively. A lot of you have seen this word, a lot of you have tried to use it, many of you misuse it or use it incorrectly or don't exactly know how it works. But respectively basically means that you're putting things in a list and then you're reflecting on that list in the same order, okay? So the same items, figures, etc. in the same order mentioned previously. So we're going to look at production of gold, silver, and platinum, I think. And then we're going to concentrate on this part of the graph, okay? So both gold and silver reached peak production in the 90s, which is this graph, at 5.5 and 3.5 trillion tons respectively. So we're talking about the peak here and the peak here of gold and silver. I mentioned gold first, and I mentioned gold's number first, 3.5. I mentioned silver second, I mentioned silver's number, 5.5 second. Now the reason I want to do this is so I don't have to say 3 or trillion tons twice. I can say it once. Make sure that you know that the order I'm giving you the numbers is the same order as the items I'm talking about. Gold first, 3.5, silver second, gold 5.5, silver second, 3.5. Another thing, and a lot of people forget this, notice I have the comma before respectively at the end of the sentence, okay, or even the middle of the sentence, because you're separating it. To show it respectively, I'm showing you that the numbers and items match in order when you have a list. Now, if you're not sure about the word respectively, you're not sure how to use it, you're not sure when to use it, don't use it. Don't force words into your writing because somebody told you that they need to be there. If you don't know how to use it, don't use it. You'll lose a lot more points using it incorrectly than not using it at all, okay? If you're not sure, just spell it out. The 90s witnessed peak production for both gold, 5.5 trillion tons in brackets, or for gold at 5.5 trillion tons in commas, and silver at 3.5 trillion tons. Say the item, say its number, say the next item, say its number. Safe is better than wrong, okay? So that's respectively. A few other things, and these should be pretty straightforward. Amount. Amount we use with non-countable items. Number we use with countable items. It's very simple. At this level, if you're writing the IELTS test, you should already know this. Make sure you don't mix these two up. Rate. Use the word rate. People don't use this enough. When you're talking about a change, increase, decrease, etc., talk about a rate. You don't always have to talk about specific numbers. Level. Level, high level, low level, we're talking about something on a scale, okay? It's not big or small, it's high or low, if you're talking about levels of things. And use the word total, especially use it as a verb instead of using the be verb. Something is something, something and something totaled something else. Let's look at some examples. The amount of interested participants in the event grew every year since surveys were first taken. So right away, any mistake here? Well, yeah, participants are countable. You can count how many people came. So the correct word should be the number of interested participants. Next, the amount of interest in the project. Interest is an idea, it's a concept. You can't count it, and therefore the amount of interest, although it's correct, you would say level because it's a scale. High interest, low interest. Remember, amount, correct. Level, better. Okay? The number of interest groups. So the types of groups are the interest groups like lobby groups. Groups is countable, number is okay. Looking to sponsor the event grew accordingly, as did the amount they were willing to invest. Now, some of you might think amounts is incorrect. It's fine. Amounts, we're talking about quantities of money. Money, uncountable. The amount, how much money each person is ready to invest. And your clue here is the word invest. You invest money. Money is uncountable, use amount. Okay, so now let's look at rate and total. I want you to start using these words because they're very effective. Although the amount of hybrid cars, again, remember cars, countable, so you want to use the word number, on the roads has increased significantly, the amount of this increase is only about 2.5% annually. Now, again, technically, the amount, because you're talking about a percentage, amount is technically correct. But you have amount, 2.5% annually, within a period of time. Annually, every year. So in this case, what you have is actually a rate. The rate of this increase is only about so much per so much time. Okay? This is a small number, ... For example, SUV registrations in 2016 were 13,000. 13,000 is a total. Use the word totaled. Totaled 13,000. The number of SUV registrations isn't really anything. It's just SUV registrations. They totaled a certain number, a certain total, actually. Now, if you can remember and use it correctly, use amount as a verb. SUV registrations in 2016 amounted to 13,000. Amounted to, totaled, same thing. Synonyms, okay? So you can use amount as a verb, which nobody does. Extra points from the graders because you have good vocabulary range, good lexical resource. Now, sales. People think, well, yeah, I know what sales are. Sales are how much money you make, right? But sales have two meanings. One is the actual transaction. Customer gives money, vendor gives product, right? So there's an exchange, there's a transaction. That situation is called a sale. Sale could also mean, excuse me, can also mean the actual value, the money value of the transaction. So sales could be two things, and people often mix these two up. So let's look at this little table here. We're talking about each year, okay? So in year one, you had 10 sales. The average of each sale was $10 for a total of, or day one, not year one, was $100. Day two, 10 sales, 10 actual transactions, $5 each, $50 in total sales. Okay? Now, keep in mind, the transaction can be sale. And the value is always sales. When you're talking about money, always with the S. When you're talking about transaction, can be singular or plural. So then you have the rest of the table. So the number of sales doubled in the third year and then retreated in the last. So the number of sales went from 10 to 20, and then, or 10, 10, and then retreated, went backwards. So this is a very good word as well, retreated, when you're talking about going backwards in your scale of whatever thing is going on. The average amount of each sale remained at a steady $10. So now I'm using amount because I'm talking about the value, the money value of each sale, of each transaction. Okay? So here, sale is a transaction, amount is the dollar value. Make sure you separate the two things. Except for the downward blip. Sales fluctuated over the span of the graph. Actually, it's not a graph, it's a table. But that's okay, we'll leave that. Totaling 100, 50, 200, and 150 in years 1, 2, 3, and 4, respectively. So I'm using all the expressions in one shot as an example. Okay? And another one. Let me just give you, let me erase this. Sales fluctuated over the 4 years in question with a low of $50 and a high of $200 in years 2 and 3, respectively. And that's another example of how to use these words. Okay? And there you have it. Sales, totaled, amount, number, etc., respectively. Fluctuated, etc. And that's all there is to it. So, if you have any questions about this, you can ask me in the YouTube comment section. Again, remember, forcing words just because you think they're going to impress the graders will probably hurt you more than they will help you. So make sure you know the words 110% or don't use them. Use something else. Use another expression, another way of giving your ideas. Okay? If you like this video, please give me a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and come back for more videos on vocab, grammar, writing tips, test tips, etc. Okay? See you soon. Bye-bye.